Welcome to the Open to Hope Show. I'm your host, Dr. Gloria Horsley, with my co-host and daughter,
Dr. Heidi Horsley.
This show's brought to you by the Open to Hope Foundation in partnership with the Compassionate Friends. Well, Heidi, what's the #1 unacknowledged loss in the world?
Oh, you know it's sibling loss. It is sibling loss. Our loss is often unacknowledged, it's minimized, and it's overlooked. Our first guest mom is Elizabeth DeVita-Raeburn. Oh. Elizabeth has written what I think is the best book out there, bar none. It is called The Empty Room, Losing a Brother or Sister at Any Age. She interviewed 77 siblings. She lost her brother, Ted. She also has another book out, and it's new, and it's called The Death of Cancer, which she wrote with her father. Hello, Elizabeth.
Hello.
So, Elizabeth, why don't we start out by you telling us about how you got started and interested in the idea of writing a book.
Ted was my older brother, 3 years older. I thought he was amazing. He thought I was probably annoying, but, but that didn't deter my adoration. And when I was 6 and he was 9, he was diagnosed with a rare immune deficiency disorder called aplastic anemia, for which there was no treatment. And the only thing they could think to do at that point was to put him in a sterile room. People referred to it as a bubble room. It wasn't bubble looking, but that was the phrase at NIH, and they thought that he would either die within 6 months or that his immune system would bounce back.
How old was Ted at that time?
He was 9.
He was 9, and so your parents bring him to the hospital, and he ends up in a bubble room, and he stays there.
So they thought they might buy him some time in this sterile room, protecting him from infection for his immune system to bounce back. So what happened, though, was that his immune system did not bounce back and he didn't die, and he ended up living there for 8.5 years.
Wow.
So during that time, our entire family basically, spent all our free time in the non-sterile outer portion of his room.
And you could never go into his room and touch him or be with him in that room again, right?
Right.
You had to be on the outside of that bubble room.
Right.
And I know that there was a movie that was loosely based on his life, The Boy in the Bubble with John Travolta.
Yeah.
I saw that movie.
So did I. I was the only one in my family who watched it, actually, and I had to watch it in secret because it was made while my brother was still alive.
What was amazing to me and interesting to me is how you grew up in the hospital, and your brother was pretty much larger than life. I mean, he knew everybody, and he started a newspaper, and he played an instrument, and
did magic shows.
All the staff would gather in his room.
He would dress up for Halloween for other little kids. A lot of this happened when I wasn't there. There are even things that I found out about his life, like the magic shows he would do for other little kids and the Halloween stuff. I found out much later.
What was your life like, and how did you feel as a sibling? I mean,
I was both aware that I had a very different life from other people, and I was also, it was just very normal to me because this was my life. It happened, when I was so young that at a certain point I remember, it was more life like that than unlike that. I had just turned 6, I think, when he went into the hospital. And so I grew up there and it was very normal, but it wasn't like anybody else's life that I knew.
So it must have been very strange for you when Ted died and all of a sudden your life was not revolving around the hospital.
It was horrific. I mean, it was, it was so horrific on so many levels at that point that it was hard to parse that out. Looking back, I realized that, our entire life for 8.5 years had been structured around my brother and that place and that room. And then suddenly we're back home thinking, how does life work? I'm still better at hospital life and all that, I think, than I am at normal life. I had to learn normal life. So that was a process we were thrown into and not prepared for at that point.
Now, I know one of the big things that siblings talk about is, how's your mother? How are your parents?
Yeah.
Talk about that a little.
The first time I heard it was at my brother's funeral. And some woman, I think it's in my book, some woman leaned down, and I know she was well-intentioned, but she leaned down and it whispered to me, and of course I'm devastated. There's this coffin hanging over a hole. I'm 14. Okay. And she said, you've got to be very good now because your parents are going through a lot.
Wow.
And I was just like, oh, okay. And it seems, you hear this as an adult and you think, well, of course, you know that that's not the case and it happened to you too, but you hear it as a child and you're really kind of being instructed. Yes. And you absorb that message. And so what I learned after this was repeated to me many times by other people was like, this was not my loss. It doesn't affect me very much. It affects my parents. It's not about me. And so it took me decades to realize that I had suppressed this loss almost entirely and that I had to deal with it in order to be able to go on with my life.
What about the pressure that is put on the surviving siblings? What's your pressure?
I think you know, my pressure was to be okay. That was another thing I think that probably kept me from dealing with the loss later on, was that nothing could be wrong with me. You know, I had to be fine and unscathed and successful and, you know, kind of do everything my brother might have done, you know, get married, have kids, all those things. I got married late and had kids late, so there's a lot of pressure there.
So your parents like, hurry, hurry.
Was it your pressure or your
I think it was a
exterior?
little, it was
That's a good
both.
question.
It was both.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, you know, I just felt like I've got to do something important. I have to make meaning of this. Like there, you know, even now, because I'm a freelancer and I shift to project, I get very anxious when I don't have something meaningful to work on, because I feel like, you know, I grew up in a hospital. I watched what my father did with cancer, watched this, you know, monumental fight my brother put up to survive, so that I can't waste my life's energy on something that's not important.
What advice do you have for somebody who's lost a sibling?
It depends on the age.
What about younger? What advice would you have for parents or whoever or anybody?
That's actually always the hardest one, because parents, you know, I've spoken at a few conferences, and especially parents of teenagers are like, what do I do? You know, what I say, they don't talk, because teenagers don't talk.
That's the big one.
Anyway, you know.
Yes.
Gosh.
Or somebody who lost a sibling and they're your age and they haven't dealt with it too.
That there's no way out but through. I mean, you know,
No
I
way out but through.
tried to avoid and avoid. I tried everything to not deal with it, and it has to be dealt with, or you won't be able to live your life fully.
The Compassionate Friends Sound of the Siblings is a closed Facebook page for bereaved siblings, and it's fabulous.
And I would also say you might want to go to the Compassionate Friends National Conference, and you know, even if you lost an adult sibling, our #1 visit on our site is loss of adult parents and siblings. So there are a lot of people hurting out there, and it's never too late or never too early to resolve those issues that you've had with them, and you might want to talk to write them a letter. You know, there are all sorts of things that you can do. Get some therapy, get some help, but talk about it, even though maybe it's way back.
Please don't say to us, you no longer want to live and you don't know how you're going to go on, because it makes us feel like we're not enough. And we've lost a sibling. We can't even fathom or think about the idea of losing a parent also.
Oh, well, Heidi, let's close on that note, and we want to thank you guys for being on the show today. It's been great. And God bless all you siblings out there. And Heidi and I always want to remind you, if you've lost hope, please lean on ours until you find your own. And good night.